privilege of teaching courses in urban economics, and there are two terms that are used when we talk about poverty. One is crisis poverty and one is chronic poverty. And so if I can define these right quick, crisis poverty is like Hurricane Katrina. I was fine, I was working a job, I was somewhere, and then immediately there was a crisis that happened, like a hurricane comes through and it just demolishes my city. And so there was a crisis and now I'm in poverty. And then there's chronic poverty. And by chronic, I mean chronic poverty. I mean, like, not only am I in poverty, but mom and dad was in poverty, and grandma and grandpa were in poverty, and aunts and uncles are in poverty, and cousins and sisters and brothers. My whole social ecosystem is in poverty. So it's this chronic, this ongoing issue of poverty. And one way in which we attack crisis poverty is like help. Man, there's a crisis, there's a hurricane, we send money. We send tons of money, we send food, we send all these things. And what we see happen eventually is these people who experience this crisis come out of poverty. Through money and food and resources. But we see something different when we do the same thing for people in chronic poverty, people who've been in poverty their whole life. We've sent money, we've sent food, we've sent a bunch of resources, but these people still stayed in poverty. One of the things that I've noted in my research in books like Toxic Charity, When Helping Hurts, these curriculums really key in on there's something different that took place with these two different groups. One person is born and raised in a situation of poverty, and so they needed additional aid. They needed additional help. I want to pause that and I want to talk about church planting just for a moment. You are a church planter. You're looking at how do I fund my church plant? And you might be thinking in your mind, please send aid, please send resources, please send help. But one of the things I want your brain to be thinking about is for you as a church planter, how you should be self-sustained. The goal would be is through the tithing offering of your local body. That would be the goal, the tithe and offering, the giving here. And so sometimes our mindset is if our sending agency, if our mother church, if our sending church could just keep pumping in resources, that would be what sustains me. Now listen, that's a great thing. And I'm going to talk about ways in which to be bold and asking for resources. But if we want to begin with the end in mind, my goal would be that we could be self-sufficient through our tithe and offering of our local body, so that honestly, when we desire to do ministry and honestly, when we desire to do mission, we don't need anyone's help because we are self-sustained right here. If you can think about that as you're planting, if you can think about that from the beginning, you'd be solving, going back to that situation, you'd be solving this chronic issue. The reality is, you're regularly, chronically going to have ministry budgets. There are regularly going to be ministry needs within your city. There's regularly going to be staffing issues, and your goal should be not how do I continue to get more resources from others? How can I generate resources within our own local body? So for me as a church planter, you're like, man, how did you do it? How did we make it? For 4 out of the 5 years I've been a church planter, I've been bivocational. Meaning I've had to work another job while also working as a local pastor. Why? Because I have a biblical responsibility to provide for my family and a biblical responsibility to respond to the call. And I don't want either of those to feel like they have to be in conflict with one another. Well, don't you got to provide for your family? Yes. Don't you want to respond to your call to be a pastor, specifically a church planter? Yes. So why did I have to be at odds? God was at work within my life to do them both. And so there might be a time in your ministry where you have to pick up a part-time job. You have to pick up some of these things. That's okay. That's not a bad thing. All that's doing is creating more resources, you yourself, for your local church, for your local ministry, for your local body, so you can do the work that God has called you to. All right. Secondly, so it's like, all right, okay, so maybe working a part-time job still isn't enough. Maybe that doesn't quite meet the needs. Well, here's another way in which I want to call you to be bold. Then ask. There's nothing wrong about asking for people to partner with what God is doing, because that's biblical as well. Right? You see this all throughout our Old and New Testament, that people have their income, their resources that came in, and then they bring some of these resources to the storehouse, or they bring some of these resources through their tithe and their offering to give to advance God's kingdom. And you, my friend, church planter, church planting team member, you do have an ability to get access to that. And so when you approach somebody about partnering with you, do it boldly. Don't be ashamed about what God has called you to do. Don't be ashamed about this ministry burden that God has placed upon your heart. Hey, we have a desire to be in this building in this neighborhood doing this outreach. And please, as you call them to respond, be bold. And what does it mean to be bold? Be specific. If your ministry budget is a certain dollar amount, if your ministry needs are a certain dollar amount or for specific items, be bold concerning those things. Be bold concerning those things. But I also want to say to you, church planner, as you're bold and asking, please have in the back of your mind, how can we also continue to grow to be self-sufficient, self-sustaining, so we can do what God has called us to do out of your own local body?